involved in doing an art project, so the movie was an art project, but nobody would edit it. So I ended up editing the whole 30 hours myself, this young girl.
Wow.
So
awesome. Did you
I was 20 on the, by then I was 21. So your dad went to Oregon.
Yes, yeah, with Ken Kesey. He didn't know him.
So what's your last name?
Purkey. It's P-U-R-K-E-Y. Did you too?
Yeah, I went to the U of O when I was younger. I'm 8 years younger. That's how I met him. Kesey was on campus. He came up for Faye's father's funeral. Faye couldn't travel because she was pregnant, and he came with George Walker. And at the time, there were only like a handful of people on campus that smoked weed, and I was one of them, and my roommate. They knocked on the door. George and Kesey knocked on the door. They were looking for girls that smoked weed. So that's how I met Kesey. Well, in seeing the other thing, that letter that Paul wrote to Laura from the Unitarian Church, because I was there, and we all came down after Kesey ran away from his sentencing and flew to Mexico and went on the lam. Then the rest of us went down to Los Angeles and we camped at Wavy's house and Johannara's house. But our first gig was at the Unitarian Church. So, because Paul Sawyer was a friend of ours and he was the minister. And so we all went over there on Sunday and set up it was a church in the round, which was like a big dome, except it had like an onion top on it. It almost looked Russian. It was very fancy for a church. Anyway, we'd never performed in the round before, so we set up, everybody set up and stuff. And I was playing the church organ because I knew how to do that. And Pranksters had our band, and we started playing some music and then we started playing some hymns, and we started playing Amazing Grace, and Paul jumped on stage and started singing in the microphone in a really loud voice and not stuttering. It was the first time ever I had heard him communicate without stuttering, and I kind of froze at the organ for a minute. I thought, what's going on? And I got distracted and was watching him, and then trying to play, and watched him sing the whole time. It was fantastic. It's amazing. So then afterwards, we all asked him what that was about, and he said, yeah, because his father was a preacher and he was raised in the church, and that was the only time he didn't stutter was when he was singing. First time I saw Paul, Babs and I came up to La Honda from Santa Cruz, and some of the people have built a tree house in the front yard of Kesey's log cabin in La Honda. And as we got out of the car and I started walking to the house, this guy with big bushy hair leaned down out of the treehouse and yelled at us. And that was the first time I ever saw Paul. He was living in the treehouse. And this was also at the same time that DMT was coming around. So a lot of people were trying it out for the first time, and Paul loved it. So the treehouse became the DMT den. So anybody wanted to get high, they'd go up there and smoke DMT. I write about it in my book. We'd been, after the bus trip, people kind of scattered to their personal lives, and then they kind of slowly drifted back to Kesey's, and then new people drifted back to Kesey's. So there were a bunch of people living there, so Kesey got the idea of having some kind of a show on the weekends as a way to maybe raise a little money, although I didn't ever see anybody pay to help feed all the people that were there, and then also give us a chance to do some art experimenting, and then also a chance to use LSD. So we did some happenings at Kesey's on the weekends, and some of the neighbors came and other friends, and and then we got busted. So that kind of changed everything. So Kesey couldn't come back to La Honda as part of his bust, and we rented a place in Santa Cruz. And so eventually Kesey and Faye and their kids moved down there with us. So the prankster scene kind of went from La Honda to Santa Cruz in SoCal, which was outside of Santa Cruz. And so in celebration, when we first found this place to rent, it was an old chicken farm, we decided to have a housewarming party. And so it was a little bit after Halloween. And so we told the Grateful Dead, who were the Warlocks at the time, and a bunch of the locals, and Hassler, who and Peter Demma owned, Drombavert and Peter Demma owned the bookstore in Santa Cruz. Hip Pocket bookstore, I was trying to remember the name, Hip Pocket bookstore. So, and that's where we found the for rent sign was on their bulletin board. So a lot of their friends and people in Santa Cruz came to this party, and everybody took acid. And then towards the end of the party, after a lot of people left, there were a few stragglers around. Kesey said, "Well, let's go do something. Let's go. We still have the whole night." And so we decided to go to a graveyard and run around and get spooky. So we went to the graveyard, and I saw some shooting stars up in the sky, and I said, "Wow, look at the shooting stars." And then Kesey said, "Yeah, it's a sign, it's a sign." He says, "We need to do more of these events. Well, we need to turn people onto acid." And Bab says, "You mean like an acid test?" And he says, "Yes, a test." He says, "We'll start having these events, and we'll call them acid tests. Can you pass the acid test?" And so that's how that happened. So a week later, Kesey was still in La Honda. We met at La Honda with the Warlocks, and that night they told us they'd changed their name to the Grateful Dead. And at that meeting, I was sewing on my new dress that I was going to wear for this event, which is my acid test dress, which is now on display in New York. And the following weekend, we did a show in San Jose. So that was our second acid test. And Paul was there. It was at Big Nig's, and Paul came as a mummy. After the bus trip, before we started doing the happenings in La Honda, we were sitting around the table one evening, and first of all, Ken Babbs was known as the Intrepid Traveler. And so he was the Intrepid Traveler, and his Merry Band of Pranksters was the full title. And so we were sitting around, and Kesey said, "Well, I've decided that we need to legalize our and make a business out of the Intrepid Traveler and the Merry Band of Pranksters." And I don't know who came up with the name Intrepid Trips, but that's when it was first formalized, Intrepid Trips, and the information service. I remember signing a document, actual document, and there are probably 10 of us there, maybe. And then I can't remember if it ever got legalized officially or what.